Welcome to the number 788 podcast with me, your host, Desmond Latham. We're chatting to Max, not his real name, but 788 is his real number. He's written a memoir called Number 788, My Experiences in Swedish Special Operations, Preparing for NATO and the War on Terror. We have to protect some of the identities of those involved in the story because many are still on the Special Forces front lines. It's a 6-part series. This is episode 2. So Max, without me yapping on you in the background, thanks very much for joining me. And also, tell me a little bit about why you decided to write this.
Thank you, Des. I'm happy to be here and thank you for letting me. So why I decided to write this, I think we touched a bit on it in the last episode, or maybe we didn't. But I actually didn't decide to write it until 10 years later. So it actually started in South Africa, if I can go back a bit. So I met Jason in 2008 when I was working in South Africa, and we became friends. And he has been nagging me, or he nagged me every year for 10 years to write something, to tell a story, to do something with it. And I always said, nah, it's not for me. I don't know what to say. I don't have anything to write. It's just, the basic. This is just basic stuff. But in 2022, we spoke again, and we had that yearly conversation. And I said, okay, I'm going to do it, but you have to help me set it up. And he said, yeah, I have the perfect person for that. So said and done. Next day, he connected with Tony that they have served together in the South African Defense Forces, and we hit it off immediately. And a week later, we actually had a book contract with Helion, who is our publisher. So it was a very rapid process, and I sat there after we signed this book contract because we only wrote a sample chapter. Tony helped me with the sample chapter and this kind of proposal. And then I was like, yeah, I don't really know if this was a good idea because I never written anything of this, of this magnitude. I don't even like to read books that much anymore. So it felt like a daunting project overall. And I was very, very uncertain how this was going to go. It felt good, of course, to have a co-author, and that's why we had Tony as a co-author, because if this went south, at least maybe he could interview me and just ghostwrite it in a way, or do his best. But I sat down. I was in the Balkans at the time. I had a bit of downtime, and so I sat down that summer in 2022, and I started writing. And about 3 months later, it was done. It was over and done with. The first draft was out, 170,000 words, and it felt kind of great. Very different feeling. So because then it was actually at that point I understood that this is feasible. Up until that point, it was more like, is it a dream? This is never going to work. It's not good enough. Who is going to read this? And then it's like, boom. Yeah, it's done now. And it actually reads. It's something. It's something that you can read. You can touch it.
So take us back. The motivation to join the military, and we chatted about this last episode where you joined and you went through the processes of the training. I'm really interested in that initial training process where you were called up into the phases of that you went through, each phase of specialist training. Talk to me about that.
So after the basic training, I was basically still at this point when I was at the end of my basic training at the Ranger Regiment. I was not highly motivated still. I applied for officer school. I actually I got in to officer school, but of course that was cancelled. And then I lost my motivation a bit until I got this call from my former commander, And he was forming this experimental unit, a special purpose unit that they were arranging themselves up at the regiment at the time. And it was, again, a handful of good men that were trying to do something incredible. Or we didn't know that then, but it became incredible in the end. So after that initial contact, it was also in the summer. I demobilized in June. I was going to start officer schools in August. So this was, and we got the letter that it was canceled late July, I think. So this was in the beginning of August, if I remember correctly. We did the selection that they had put together for during 2 weeks, and then training started basically immediately. And that was almost 14 months. It's I don't know exactly, but between 1 year and 14, 15 months. It's hard to say when the training ends, because it's ongoing, never-ending project. So that is the first transition into the special purpose units.
There were some very specific training techniques that you used that you can talk about. Tell me about that. I mean, especially during the winter.
So when we started, when the selection was done and we came up to the special purpose units, it was led by very senior and seasoned officers. So they knew what they were doing. They were used to putting training together. So it was very well organized. It was basically the only thing that differed, that struck me immediately when we came to the special purpose units, and because most of us, or half of us, were straight out of basic, basically, and then selection, and then we came there. That was the attitude. It was a totally different attitude that was built not on the motivation, because when you're in basic, when you do ranger training, you're motivated because you want to overcome the challenge, you want to get the beret, you want to get the ranger tab. There are many things that drives you, but that is also a limited drive, because you can only do that for an amount of time. When you move on and you understand that we're going to do this professionally now, then you have to find another motivation, and that has to be almost a lifestyle choice that you make, because you can never you can not be driven by medals or tabs or berets anymore. You have to be driven by getting better every day, because most of that kind of training that you do is about, yet again, about your personal skill set. And I'm getting a bit off the subject now, but it's still I think it's a valid point, because when special forces train special operators, any kind of intelligence, special purpose units, you kind of revert back to the basics, and then you start building again on your basic skills, and you hone them to perfection, because you have the time to do that. You have years and years, usually, or training is usually long, between 1 and 2 years. So you can every day try to improve your pistol draw and cut half of a second of that, or you can improve your land navigation skills with the map and compass. There are so many things that you revert back to, because now you have the time to really hone these skills and explore them. So I think that is different, because when you come into special purpose, special operations, special forces, anything like that training environment, you actually think it's going to be different. You think it's going to be almost like James Bond, when he gets down to Q's office. You're just going to have gadgets and cool stuff. We're going to have explosive stuff. We're going to have fast cars. We're only going to jump out of planes, parachute, interrogate prisoners, new stuff. But what happens is that you get worse stuff. You're equipped with worse stuff than you have during basic, because you're going to learn the basics again. And then you repeat this whole circle. So it's nothing. And it's nothing like you think it's going to be, or that most people think it's going to be. And that can be a strong factor for many operators in training because it feels like they're robbed of something, because all of their everything that they have visualized in their life, how this is going to be, how much better it's going to be, how much cooler it's going to be, it's actually nothing like that. I mean, it depends. It takes 1 year, 2 years, then it's going to be cooler. But before it can get cooler, you have to be better.
Yeah, it's about an initiative. I was very aware of that. And also with the training in South Africa, they special forces, they used to rely on, running a 2.4 mile in X minutes and so on. And then they realized that's irrelevant. It's actually mental aptitude and capacity and capabilities and lateral thinking.
Definitely. To have touch on the physical part, I mean, when you get a bit older in the game, most special forces, and this is no critique and it's not for all of them, of course, but most intelligence operators, special forces operators that I have met that have been in the game for a while, they are out of shape. And I'm not saying that they are in reasonable shape for what they're going to do, but they don't have that peak physique, the Navy SEAL fitness that you usually are required to have when you're joining. And some of them would even be considered obese, but it actually doesn't matter because that is something that can either be trained away if it's needed to, or maybe they just let it be like that because they have the experience they have and the mental flexibility they have developed over the years. It's invaluable, and that is what they want to get to. And I think armies, government agencies across the world, they're getting to that point, but they're still a bit stuck on this physical part. And I mean, it is important because it's like going to school. It's important to show that you can sit, you can listen, you can do all of these things. But there is a point when it doesn't really matter anymore, when it's all about what's inside.
Talk to me about the training that you went through when you met your mentors and the specific things that happened to you just prior to deployment.
Prior to deployment, we had prior to deployment, we actually had deployment. So to say, it was included in the training deal, but after this formal training, you have a bit of formal training or quite a bit of formal training. Then people they're starting to go different places. It's hard to keep track. I mean, this is a platoon-sized outfit. You don't know where people is. Some are doing technical school. Some are driving boats somewhere. People are just all over the place. And I was selected with a few others. We went to the UK, for example. We went there twice. First, we went to we have to cut this out. Force Research Unit. Yeah, that's what it is. First, we went to the Force Research Unit because one of our majors had a personal connection there, and since they have extensive experience of all of this ISTAR kind of missions, HUMINT, all of this they have practiced and honed, of course, and paid with in blood in Northern Ireland. So we were fortunate enough to be able to go there and tap into that. A very unique experience, especially for a Swede. The Brits, they have a totally different training style. I mean, the Swedes are not mild, but we are still quite mild when it comes down to it. While the Brits, they are not afraid to get physical. They are not afraid to show force, but also to show emotion, while the Swedes are more balanced and bland like that. So it was a very different experience. We trained with them for quite a few weeks. We didn't know that we were going to be deployed in an ISTAR HUMINT capacity at that point. And for example, when you go to the UK and you have you train green drop-offs, where you have a civilian van, you sit in the back, a military guy sitting in the back, and you're going to do a drop-off. And we drove through a industrial area, and then the whole van started to shake. They were bashing in the windows, and we opened the side door, and concrete blocks and a chair came flying in, and it's like, yep, it's their meaning, it's business now, because it was a riot. It was not a riot training, but it was actually, they were simulating a situation from Northern Ireland where one of these drop-off vehicles went astray, and they were stuck in a funeral procession, and this is basically what happened to them. And they will beat you up. They will beat you bloody. I mean, they won't kill you, they won't seriously injure you, but they will beat you. And because they will beat you until you show them that you're going to kill them. Because that is the point of this thing. You have to go out and kill someone to get some space. And that mindset, at this point, we didn't have that in Sweden. Of course, I mean, everybody understands the mechanics of it, but it was a very different way of looking at it, because these guys, these instructors, they know the people who got killed. And the mistake they did was that they didn't shoot one or two people when they got out of the car, because that is what you need to create just a tiny bit of space, because they're going to come back right back at you again.
I'm interested in, okay, so you went through the formative training and then you end up being deployed across parts of Europe. Talk to me about that. I mean, there were some fundamentally interesting moments where you were no longer in Sweden. You were actually deployed basically in parts of Europe supporting other special forces.
So then basically the training continues, and of course we go to different, we train with Norwegians, Finnish, Danish, but that's kind of basic because we stick together like that. But we had a guy, or we didn't have he was not a guy, and he is still alive. He's a captain, and I call him Captain L in the book, and he was a former French legionnaire. He actually did this weird, I don't know how he pulled it off, because usually it's not very, they don't see it kindly if you go serve somewhere else. So he actually, he went to officer school. He became a second lieutenant. Then he kind of, he quit and he joined the Legion and served in the Legion for 5 years. And then he came back and, just continued being a second lieutenant. It's quite unique. Very, he actually did several combat drops over Chad in '88, which was a unique experience that he, when you get to know him, he has a lot of interesting stories. But anyway, of course, he has been the liaison officer at the regiment for decades now, towards the French, because of course he has very good contacts there, especially with both with the Legion, but also with their intelligence and their special forces units. So they have actually had a training program even before I did my basic training, where they come up, they get winter training, they send some people down that get some humming training or something else. But anyways, with his contacts, they set up so we could train with the French intelligence, or some part went with the airborne special forces, and I was in the team who went with the intelligence. And they also have it's a very different experience. I mean, we are fresh at this point. We have done basic training as rangers. We have done 10, 12, 13, 14 months of special purpose units training, which is fair. I mean, we're skilled. We're not unskilled, but still we haven't really done anything. Nobody has been anywhere done anything in a real environment. So we get down to France. You go to the headquarters, you sit on the wooden benches for a few hours, almost like when you're waiting in a South Africa on some government office, and you sit and wait for your badges and your papers, and then they just said, yeah, you can, your van is waiting outside. And basically at that point we are thrown into a live operation. We don't know that at that point. They just give us some folders, and a briefing, and we think it's an exercise, but it's actually not an exercise. And the French, they do a lot of this because they are, they have a lot of experience. So we are thrown straight into a live operation, which includes a lot of foxtrot. When you pursuit on foot, follow on foot, and which we had done enough of, but never live. And this was a quite hard target to start with, because now we're talking again with Al-Qaeda supporters, funders, recruiters, those kind of, it's that environment, and that's a different environment, because if you fuck up, you can fuck up, not only it can become dangerous, but most of all you can fuck up years and years of work that they have done.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Max, we need to finish off for this part of the series, and we'll come back to that follow-up from the description of being able to be taken as kind of raw recruits, be honed and sharpened, and mentally be thrown into a real operation. So I'll be very interested in talking to you in episode 3, where we take the next steps, where you actually began to hunt down Al-Qaeda and people inside Europe who were involved in terror. And I'm sure as we go through the next part of the series, we're in episode 2 of a 6-part series, and we're talking to Max, who's not his real name, about number 788, my experiences in Swedish Special Operations, preparing for NATO and the war on terror. And we'll talk more about the aspect of the stoic Swede versus the excitable American and the laconic South African Special Forces. So thanks, Max, and look forward to speaking to you in episode 3, which will be in a week.
Thank you, Des, and I'm looking forward to